The words sliced through the humid air of the community hall like a summer storm breaking too soon. Riley Harper, you think you can parade your choices around decent folk and call it pride? Look at her, everyone. Our little lost lamb, straying into the devil's own pasture. Evelyn's voice, laced with that honeyed venom only a Southern belle-turned-stepmother could muster, echoed off the pine-paneled walls, drawing gasps from the circle of neighbors gathered for the annual harvest supper. Riley stood frozen at the edge of the potluck table, her plate of cornbread and collards trembling in her hands, the weight of 200 eyes pinning her like specimens under glass. She had come home to Savannah County after 8 years in Portland, chasing whispers of reconciliation, only to find the old wounds festering under fresh salt. Evelyn, with her perfectly coiffed silver hair and pearls that gleamed like accusations, had waited for this moment. The church lady's Bible study turned social hour, the one place where sins were aired like laundry on a line. Riley's crime? A fleeting mention of her ex, Lena, in a conversation about city life, a casual admission that cracked open the family's gilded facade. Now, as laughter rippled through the crowd like dry leaves in a gale, Riley felt the ground shift beneath her boots, the red clay soil of her childhood rising up to swallow her whole. But it was the silence that cut deepest, her father's averted gaze, the way his calloused hands clenched around his untouched sweet tea, as if willing the floorboards to open and spare them all. Harlan Harper, the man who had buried his first wife under a live oak in the family plot and married Evelyn 6 months later, had always been a shadow in Riley's life, more absence than presence. He cleared his throat now, a low rumble like distant thunder, but no words followed. Riley dropped her plate, the porcelain shattering against the hardwood with a sound that mirrored the fracture in her chest. She turned and walked out into the twilight, the screen door slamming behind her like a final judgment, leaving the scent of fried okra and betrayal in her wake. The drive back to the old Harper homestead was a blur of fireflies winking mockingly against the windshield, their golden pulses a cruel echo of the warmth she had once imagined finding here. Riley gripped the steering wheel of her battered pickup until her knuckles ached, the radio humming low with Lucinda Williams crooning about passion and ache. Savannah County stretched out like a faded quilt, rolling tobacco fields stitched with barbed wire, creeks murmuring secrets to the willows, and everywhere the heavy perfume of magnolias masking the rot beneath. She had fled this place at 20, suitcase in hand and heart ablaze with the naive fire of first love, only to return at 28, hollowed by city heartbreaks and the quiet erosion of time. The house loomed at the end of the gravel drive, its wraparound porch sagging under the weight of ivy and regret. Built in the 1840s by some long-dead ancestor who traded in cotton and cruelty, it had always felt more like a museum of ghosts than a home. Riley parked beside the rusted swing set from her girlhood, its chains creaking in the breeze like a lullaby turned dirge. Inside, the air was thick with the must of disuse. Evelyn and Harlan had moved to town years ago, leaving the place to spiders and silence after Riley refused to sell. She flicked on the kitchen light, the bare bulb casting long shadows across the linoleum, and poured herself a glass of bourbon from a bottle Harlan kept hidden in the pantry, his one vice, or so the stories went. Sleep came in fits that night, tangled in sheets that smelled of dust and distant rain. Dreams pulled her under like the Chattahoochee River in flood season. Fragments of Portland's neon nights with Lena, their bodies entwined in a loft apartment overlooking the Willamette, laughter dissolving into arguments sharp as broken glass. Lena had been fire, dark curls and darker moods, a graphic designer who sketched Riley's face into every canvas, until the day she packed her brushes and left for New York without a backward glance. "You're too rooted here, she had said, her voice a velvet blade, like kudzu choking everything wild. Waking at dawn, Riley lay staring at the ceiling cracks that mapped out her fractures, the shame from the hall seeping back like damp through the walls. By morning, resolve hardened in her veins, cool as the dew on the porch rail. She couldn't stay, not with Evelyn's words festering like an open sore, infecting every memory. But leaving again felt like surrender. Another chapter of running from the girl who had once climbed the attic stairs to read her mother's yellow journals by flashlight. June Harper, Riley's real mother, had died when Riley was 12, taken by a sudden aneurysm while hanging laundry in the side yard. Her laughter cut short mid-note. The journals spoke of a woman alive with poetry and quiet rebellions, sketches of wildflowers pressed between pages, verses about the curve of a woman's hip hidden in metaphors of river bends. Riley had devoured them as a teen, piecing together the puzzle of her own desires from those ink-stained clues, but Evelyn had burned them one winter night, calling them foolish scribbles unfit for a proper home. Now, as the sun climbed, gilding the fields in reluctant gold, Riley wandered the overgrown garden behind the house. Weeds choked the rosebushes June had planted, their thorns snagging at her jeans like desperate fingers. She knelt by the stone bench, half buried in azaleas, and dug with bare hands until her nails blackened with soil. There, wrapped in oilcloth and forgotten beneath the roots, was a tin box, rusted at the edges, its latch sprung like a secret begging release. Heart-pounding, Riley pried it open, dust motes dancing in the light like fireflies at noon. Inside lay a bundle of letters, tied with faded ribbon the color of old tea stains. Envelopes yellowed with age, postmarked from Charleston and Atlanta, addressed in a looping script to "My dearest June." The first one slipped free, dated 1982, the year before Riley's birth. Riley's breath caught as she unfolded it, the paper crackling like autumn leaves underfoot. Dearest June. The rain here in Charleston beats against the window like it's trying to wash away the distance between us. I close my eyes and see you still, your hair catching the porch light, the way your laugh pulls the stars closer. Lydia says I should forget that a woman like me has no place chasing shadows across state lines, but she doesn't know the shape of your hand in mine, the quiet promise we made under that willow tree. Come to me soon, love. The world is colder without your warmth. Forever yours, Eleanor. Riley's fingers trembled, tracing the ink that had dried decades ago. Eleanor. The name tugged at a half-remembered story, a great-aunt or cousin who had vanished from family lore after a scandal whispered in church pews. But this was no scandal of the tame variety. These words breathed with the intimacy of stolen glances, of touches lingered too long in the parlor. June's mother? No, the dates. Eleanor was a lover, a first love, hidden in the folds of Southern propriety like a pearl in an oyster shell. She read on, sinking onto the bench as the sun climbed higher, the letters unfolding like petals in time-lapse. Eleanor wrote from boarding houses and art studios, her prose a tapestry of longing. Descriptions of Carolina beaches where waves crashed like unspoken vows, of nights spent sketching June's silhouette against moonlit pines. There were enclosures, pressed violets, a lock of auburn hair that matched Riley's own, and pleas for June to leave Harlan, the steady farmer who courted her with wildflowers and promises of stability. But June's replies, tucked in the bundle like echoes, revealed the heartbreak. I cannot, Elle. The child grows in me now, a light I must shield from storms like ours. Forgive me but love me still. Riley's tears fell onto the pages, blurring the edges, as the pieces slotted into place. She was that child born of compromise, a bridge between duty and desire. June had stayed, built this house of thorns and beauty, only to die young, her secrets interred with her. And Evelyn, oh, Evelyn had known. The burning of the journals, the venom in her voice last night. It wasn't just Riley's choices she despised, but the echo of June's unspoken truth, a mirror she shattered to avoid her own reflection. The afternoon waned into evening, fireflies emerging like hesitant stars, as Riley gathered the letters close. For the first time in years, the shame receded, replaced by a fierce, blooming ache, not of loss but of inheritance. She was June's daughter, threaded with the same quiet fire, the same love that defied naming. But dawn would bring decisions. Confront Evelyn, or let the past dissolve like mist over the fields. Riley rose, the tin box under her arm, and walked toward the house, the gravel crunching soft underfoot, each step a tentative reclaiming of ground long ceded to silence. The bourbon burned going down, but it was the letters that scorched Riley's soul through the long night. She sat at the scarred oak table in the kitchen, the single bulb overhead swinging gently from a draft, casting her shadow long and wavering across the walls like a specter seeking form. One by one, she spread the correspondence out, 37 letters in all, spanning 3 years of clandestine fire before flickering to embers. Eleanor's hand was bold, artistic loops that danced across the page, while June's was finer, hesitant, as if each word carried the risk of discovery. Riley traced the creases, imagining the women who had held them. Eleanor, the painter from Charleston, her canvases alive with coastal storms and the curve of a lover's neck. June, the farmer's daughter turned reluctant wife, her days measured in furrows plowed and secrets sown. By midnight, the story etched itself into Riley's bones. Eleanor Voss had been 25 when they met, a visiting artist at a county fair in '81, her booth of seascapes drawing June like a moth to lantern light. They had stolen weekends, picnics by the Savannah River, where the water ran murky and deep as their confessions, drives up to the Blue Ridge foothills, where mist clung to the hollers like a veil over their kisses. Eleanor's letters painted it vivid. Your skin tastes of salt and honeysuckle, June, and I fear I'll drown in you before the tide pulls me back. But the world conspired against them. Eleanor's family, old money tied to shipping fortunes, demanded a match with a Charleston lawyer. Harlan, steady and unyielding as the red clay, offered June a ring and a future unmarred by whispers. Riley paused at a letter from '83, the year of her conception. The doctor confirmed it today, a summer child, kicking already like she knows the wild in her blood. Harlan beams, calls it a blessing. But my heart fractures at the thought of you alone in that attic studio, brushes idle. If I could weave you into our days, I would. Instead, I plant petunias by the porch and pretend their purple is the shade of your eyes. Tears pricked Riley's eyes anew. She had always wondered at the petunias, hardy blooms that outlasted the roses, defying the Georgia heat. June had poured her unspoken grief into that soil, nurturing what she could not fully claim. Dawn crept in with a blush of rose through the lace curtains, finding Riley slumped over the table, the letters fanned like a losing hand. Exhaustion pulled at her, but sleep was a distant shore. Instead, she rose and wandered to the living room, where family photos lined the mantel like sentinels. There was Harlan in his army fatigues, young and stern, Evelyn at their wedding, her smile tight as a corset, and June radiant in a sundress, her hand resting protectively on the swell of her belly. Riley had never seen Eleanor in any frame erased, as if she had been a fever dream, but now in the softening light she saw the echoes, the tilt of June's chin, the spark in her gaze that mirrored Riley's own when she caught Lena's eye across a crowded bar. The phone buzzed on the counter, shattering the hush. Evelyn's number, insistent as a heartbeat. Riley let it ring, watching the screen light up with missed calls, each vibration a ripple in the pond of her resolve. What would she say? You shamed me for loving a woman, but mother did it first and fiercer. Or perhaps nothing at all. Words had failed them all for too long. When the ringing ceased, silence rushed back, thick with the scent of cooling coffee and unearthed truths. She needed air, movement to shake the stagnation. Grabbing her jacket, faded denim that carried the faint trace of Portland rain, Riley stepped onto the porch, the boards groaning under her weight like old bones protesting the dawn. The field stretched golden now, dew-kissed and waiting for the plow, while beyond, the distant line of the Atlantic shimmered like a promise half-kept. She walked the property line, boots sinking into the soft earth, past the barn where Harlan had taught her to mend fences, his lessons more about endurance than repair. Kudzu climbed the rails in relentless waves, a green tide that smothered oaks and outbuildings alike. Riley hacked at it with a garden shear from the shed, the snip of blades a rhythm to her unraveling thoughts. Each cut released a memory. Climbing those same rails as a child, June's voice calling her down with laughter that tasted like iced tea on a July porch. The summer after her death, when Evelyn moved in and the house tightened like a fist, rules multiplying like weeds. A lady doesn't wear trousers to church, Riley Grace, Evelyn would say, her eyes scanning for infractions, as if propriety could stitch the family's frayed seams. Harlan retreated further into his silences, his love a quiet provision of meals and mended hems, never venturing into the territory of hearts. By 16, Riley had learned to hide, her first crush on classmate Daisy Montgomery buried under layers of tomboy bluster, the ache for something softer than the world's rough edges. Sweat beaded on her brow as the sun strengthened, turning the air to syrup. She paused at the creek that bordered the land, its waters gurgling over smooth stones, carrying leaves like fragile boats. Kneeling, Riley trailed her fingers in the current, cool and forgiving, and let the letters' weight settle. They weren't just paper. They were a map to June's hidden self, a testament that love like hers, fierce, unspoken, oceanic, was not a deviation but a current running deep beneath the surface. Yet doubt gnawed. Could she forgive Evelyn whose shame masked her own fears, or was that bridge burned beyond crossing? A rustle in the underbrush pulled her from reverie, a deer doe-eyed and tentative, emerging from the thicket to drink. It regarded her with liquid calm before vanishing back into the green, leaving only ripples. Riley stood, resolve flickering like sunlight on water. The town waited with its prying eyes and half-forged paths. She would face it, letters in hand, not as the shamed daughter but as the heir to a legacy of quiet revolutions. But first, a stop at the county library, where archives might yield Eleanor's trail. A painter's life, perhaps still breathing in faded galleries or forgotten attics. The drive into town wound through hollows where dogwoods bloomed defiant against the encroaching fall, their white petals a fleeting banner of surrender. Savannah County's seat, a cluster of brick storefronts and white-steepled churches, hummed with mid-morning life. Farmers at the diner swapping rain forecasts, children on bikes tracing figure eights in the square. Riley parked outside the library, a squat Carnegie building with ivy-cloaked columns, and slipped inside, the cool hush wrapping around her like an old quilt. The reference desk was manned by Ms. Lydia, irony's sharp twist, the same name from Eleanor's letters, who peered over half-moons with the keenness of a hawk. "Harper girl," Lydia said, her voice a drawl softened by years. "Heard about the supper. Folks talk faster than they pray." Riley nodded, throat tight, and slid the tin box across the scarred oak counter. "I need help tracing someone. Eleanor Voss, Charleston, early 80s. Artist." Lydia's brows lifted, a spark of recognition flaring. "Voss? Honey, that's a name that stirs ghosts. Let me dig." As Lydia vanished into the stacks, Riley wandered the local history aisle, fingers trailing spines etched with tales of sheriffs and sharecroppers. One volume caught her eye, Shadows on the Lowcountry, Artists of the Carolina Coast. Flipping it open, she found Eleanor's face staring back. A black and white portrait from '85, her features sharp as salt air, eyes holding the sea's unrest. The bio was sparse. Born 1957, studied at the Rhode Island School of Design, exhibited in Charleston until a personal scandal led to seclusion in the Smokies. Last known, a cabin near Asheville, 1990. Riley's pulse quickened, the mountains called, a pull as insistent as the letter's ribbon. Lydia returned with a microfiche reel, confirming the trail. Eleanor had retreated after June's wedding announcement hit the society pages, her paintings turning abstract, storm-swept voids. "She stopped showing after '84, Lydia murmured. "Folks said she broke like a wave on rocks." Riley thanked her, box clutched tight, and stepped back into the sun, the weight of possibility bending her toward the horizon. But homeward bound, the truck sputtered to a halt on a backroad bridge, engine coughing like a confession withheld. Steam hissed from the hood, stranding her amid whippoorwills' calls and the river's indifferent murmur. She popped the hood, cursing under her breath. Harlan had promised to tune it. Another vow dissolved in inaction. Footsteps approached from the tree line, deliberate and unhurried. A woman in work boots and a linen shirt rolled to her elbows, dark hair cropped short and sun-streaked, carrying a toolbox that swung like an afterthought. "Need a hand?" the woman asked, her voice low and steady, laced with the hill's rounded vowels. Riley straightened, wiping grease on her jeans, and met eyes the color of river birch. Clara Whitmore, she would learn later, the local mechanic who fixed more than engines in this stretch of nowhere. In that moment, amid the breakdown's raw edge, something shifted. A crack in the armor, letting in the first breath of air after drowning. Clara's hands were steady on the wrench, her movements precise as a watchmaker's, coaxing the truck's reluctant heart back to life with a patience that bordered on grace. Riley leaned against the fender, arms crossed to steady her own unsteady pulse, watching the play of sunlight through the live oaks dapple Clara's skin. "Radiator hose," Clara said finally, straightening with a wipe of her forearm across her brow. "Patch job'll get you home, but you'll want a proper fix come Monday. I'm at the garage on Elm, Clara Whitmore. No charge for stragglers." Riley nodded, murmuring thanks that felt too small for the unexpected anchor. Clara lingered a beat, her gaze lingering too, not prying but present, like the river's current brushing the bank. "Heard the supper talk?" she added softly, packing her tools. "Small towns got long memories, short on mercy. You hold your head though. Some shames ain't yours to carry." With that, she tipped an imaginary hat and melted back into the trees, leaving Riley with the hum of cooling metal and a warmth uncoiling in her chest, fragile as a fern frond unfurling. The truck limped home under a sky bruising to indigo, fireflies scripting Morse code in the dusk. Riley parked and retreated to the porch swing, letters in her lap, the chains creak a metronome to her thoughts. Clara's words echoed Evelyn's venom but refracted it through prism of kindness, empathy unearned and unasked. Who was she, this mechanic with calluses mapping quiet stories, Her presence a balm to Riley's raw edges. Savannah County was a web of kin and grudges, yet Clara moved through it untangled, her shop a neutral ground where farmers and artists alike brought their breakdowns. Sleep claimed her there on the swing, lulled by Katydid's chorus, dreams weaving Eleanor and June with threads of birch eyes and steady hands. Morning brought resolve. The mountains with their fog-shrouded peaks and hidden hollows, called louder now Eleanor's ghost a lodestar. But first town groceries, perhaps a detour to the garage, if only to repay a debt or chase a spark. She showered under tepid water that drummed like rain on tin, emerging to dress in her least worn flannel, auburn hair tamed into a loose braid. The tin box rode shotgun as she drove, its contents a talisman against the day's uncertainties. Elm Street bustled with Saturday rhythm. The bakery spilling cinnamon scents, the feed store's porch lined with rocking chairs and tall tales. Clara's garage squatted at the end, bays open to the sun, the air humming with pneumatic whirs and oil's sharp tang. She was under a sedan, legs protruding like an invitation, humming a tune Riley half recognized. Something old Emmylou Harris, voice roughened by gravel and grace. Back so soon? Clara called, sliding out on a creeper, grease smudged on her cheek like war paint. Riley held out a thermos of coffee from the diner, black and scalding. Fuel for the fixer. And that proper fix you mentioned. Clara accepted with a grin that crinkled her eyes, pouring a cup and gesturing to a stool by the workbench. They talked in fits, weather's whims, the creeks rising after last week's squall, sidestepping deeper waters until Riley's fingers drummed the tin box, betraying her. Found these yesterday, she said, voice low as confession. My mother's. From her. Someone. Before me. Clara listened without interruption as Riley spilled the letter's essence. The stolen summers, the love that bloomed wild and withered under convention's frost. Makes you wonder, Riley finished, what we buried to keep the peace. Clara set her cup down, expression thoughtful as a still pond. My aunt was like that, loved a woman in the 70s up in Boone. They ran a pottery shop in the hills, quiet as you please, till the church elders came calling. She never married, poured it all into clay instead. Through the most beautiful bowls, veined with blue like mountain streams. She paused, meeting Riley's gaze. Your mama's story. It's not shame, Riley. It's seed. What grows from it depends on the tending. The words landed soft, tilling soil long fallow. Clara didn't press, didn't offer pity's pat. Instead, she handed Riley a rag to wipe her hands, their fingers brushing in a spark of contact, electric, fleeting, alive. Truck's ready by noon, Clara said, turning back to the engine. But if you're heading north, watch the passes. Fog rolls in like regret. Riley left with a nod, heart lighter, the garage's clangor fading into birdsong as she veered toward the square. The library drew her again. Lydia's domain a sanctuary of dust and discovery. Armed with Eleanor's bio, Riley pored over maps and clippings. Asheville's art scene in the 90s, a mention of Voss in a 92 gallery show. Abstract landscapes evoking loss's quiet fury. No obituary, no final mark. Eleanor had slipped the net, perhaps content in anonymity. A phone call to the Buncombe County Historical Society yielded a thread. A cabin on the French Broad, deeded to Voss in '88, still standing per tax rolls. Riley booked a room at a Smokies Inn, impulsive as a river's bend, telling herself it was for closure, not chase. But leaving meant facing Harlan and Evelyn, the unspoken rift yawning wider. She drove to their rancher on the town's edge, a neat bungalow with azaleas marching sentinel by the walk. Harlan answered, his face weathered as old leather, eyes holding the questions he never voiced. Daughter, he said, stepping aside. Evelyn hovered in the kitchen, apron starched, her silence a wall thicker than magnolia bark. Riley set the tin box on the formica table, letters spilling like autumn harvest. Found these. Mother's. From Eleanor. Evelyn's hand flew to her throat, pearls clicking like rosary beads. Foolish notions, she whispered, but her voice cracked, betraying the tremor. Harlan sank into a chair, unfolding a letter with hands that shook. June never said, he murmured, tracing Eleanor's script. Riley watched them, the room heavy with unsaid decades. Evelyn's jealousy of a ghost, Harlan's blindness to the woman he wed for steadiness, not spark. I shamed you, Evelyn said at last, eyes downcast, the admission brittle as dry leaves. Seeing you echo her. It stirred fears I'd buried. My sister, she Loved unwisely too. Lost everything. The confession hung. A bridge of thorny vines. Riley reached across, tentative, her touch a question. It wasn't shame, Evelyn. It was fear. But love like that? It's not a sin to outrun. Harlan nodded, tears carving channels in his stubble. I failed you both. Stay for supper. They did, the meal a halting ritual of cornbread and stories. June's laughter in the garden, Eleanor's phantom sketches. Forgiveness didn't bloom full. It was a shoot, green and probing, roots delving into shared soil. As Riley drove away, the sun dipping low, she felt the fracture mend. Not seamless but strong in its scars. Clara's garage loomed in the rear view, a beacon. Tomorrow the mountains with their whispers of what might yet unfold. The road north unspooled like a ribbon of fate, winding from Carolina lowlands to the Appalachians' embrace. Riley crossed into Tennessee at dusk, the terrain rising in folds of green and gray, rivers carving secrets from stone. Asheville greeted her with bohemian bustle, street musicians plucking banjos under gas lamps, galleries spilling light onto brick walks. Her inn, a converted mill on the French Broad, hummed with the water's rush, rooms papered in wildflower prints that evoked June's garden. She dined alone on trout and greens, the letters her companion, Eleanor's final missive a ache. If fate denies us this life, let it be the next. Paint me in your dreams, June. Morning fog cloaked the hollers as Riley rented a jeep, navigating switchbacks to the cabin's remote perch. The structure emerged like a sigh. Log walls mossed with age, chimney puffing wood smoke, a studio window overlooking valleys veiled in mist. A truck sat in the drive, familiar in its rugged lines. Clara? No, impossible. Yet there she was, stepping from the porch with a stack of firewood, her cropped hair silvered by the haze. You followed the river too? Clara asked, surprise softening to smile. Riley laughed, the sound startling birds from the eaves. Tracked a painter. Eleanor Voss. This her place. Clara nodded, setting the load down. Bought it from her estate last year. She passed in 22, quiet like she lived. Left the cabin to a trust for women artists. I fix it up, keep the lights on. Fates we've tightened. Clara, Potter's niece, now steward of echoes. They toured the interior, room sparse with pine and memory. Eleanor's easel by the window, canvases stacked like tombstones, each a storm of blues and indigos. Riley found a sketchbook, June's face emerging from charcoal smudges. Eyes alive with the love letters sang. She never forgot, Clara said, voice hushed. Taught classes here till the end, unloving fierce despite the world. They sat on the porch as noon burned off the fog, sharing coffee from a dented pot, stories flowing like the broad below. Clara spoke of her own quiet loves, a partner lost to illness 5 years back, leaving her to mend alone, the pottery wheel as solace, hands shaping clay into vessels for what couldn't be held. Riley shared Lena's blaze and fade, the letter's revelation of inherited fire. You're like her, Clara said, gesturing to a faded photo of Eleanor on the mantel, her gaze C-sharp. Rooted but reaching. Their hands found each other across the rail, tentative as dawn light, the touch a bridge from wound to wonder. Days blurred into a rhythm of repair. Clara teaching Riley to glaze pots in the shed, their laughter mingling with the kiln's glow. Evenings hiking ridges where rhododendrons bloomed defiant, Eleanor's paths leading to overlooks that stole breath. One twilight under a sky stitched with stars, Clara pulled Riley close by a campfire's edge. Their kiss soft as river mist. Not conquest but communion, a mending of separate aches. Stay a while, Clara whispered, forehead to forehead. Riley did, the cabin's hearth-warming spaces long cold. Love's quiet bloom unfurling in the mountain's cradle. The cabin's walls seemed to lean in as autumn deepened, leaves turning the valleys to tapestries of crimson and gold. Each gust a page turning in Riley's unfolding life. Clara's presence was a steady current, her mornings spent at the wheel while Riley explored Eleanor's archives, journals bound in leather, filled with musings on color and loss. Blue as the hue of her absence, June vast as the Atlantic between us. Riley transcribed them by lamplight, piecing a narrative for the trust Clara steward, but more than legacy, it was understanding that bloomed. June's choice not betrayal but sacrifice, a love so profound it reshaped itself into motherhood's fierce harbor. Forgiveness ripened slow like persimmons heavy on the branch. Letters home to Harlan carried updates laced with light, Clara's dry wit over venison stew, the way the French broad sang lullabies at night. Harlan replied in his halting script, enclosing photos of the homestead's revival. Evelyn on her knees in the garden, replanting petunias with a tenderness Riley had never witnessed. "She's sorry, he wrote. We talk now about June. About what we lost." One evening Evelyn called, her voice stripped of barbs, tentative as a fawn's first steps. "Those letters. Kept one, you know. From Eleanor after you were born. Begged June to run. I burned the rest out of spite, thinking it poison. But it was medicine, wasn't it? For all of us." Riley listened from the cabin's rocker, Clara's hand warm on her knee, the fire crackling like applause. "It was," she said, the words a key turning in a long rusted lock. "Poison only if we let it fester. Come see the mountains sometime. There's room here for mending." Evelyn's laugh was rusty, genuine. "Maybe I will, child. Maybe I will." The call ended with promises fragile but rooted, and Riley turned to Clara. Their embrace a seal on the moment, bodies aligning not in haste, but in the deep recognition of souls scarred similarly. Winter whispered in on winds that rattled the shutters, blanketing the ridges in frost lace. Clara's shop in Asheville called her down mountain thrice weekly, leaving Riley to the cabin's solitude, where understanding deepened into communion with ghosts. She hung Eleanor's canvases in the studio, their storm softening in daylight, revealing undercurrents of light, a golden thread weaving through the indigo, symbol of persistence. One canvas, untitled, held a figure by a river, June unmistakably, her form blurred as if dissolving into water, yet reaching toward an unseen shore. Riley sat before it for hours, sketching her own interpretations. Riley and Clara on the porch, hands entwined. A child perhaps, laughing in some future garden. Clara returned each time with clay-flecked cheeks and tales of town eccentrics. A fiddler who played for tips, a baker whose pies held secrets. Their evenings wove domestic spells. Clara's fingers kneading dough while Riley read aloud from the letters, Eleanor's passion infusing the air like wood smoke. "She loved without apology in the end," Clara observed one night, as snow feathered the window panes. "After June, she painted for them both. That's forgiveness, I think, turning ache to art." Riley nodded, tracing Clara's palm lines. Each crease a story of labor and love. "And us? What do we make of it?" Their bond deepened in layers like the mountains themselves. Shared hikes to frozen waterfalls, where ice gleamed prismatic under weak sun. Quiet mornings in bed, limbs tangled in flannel sheets, whispers mapping dreams unspoken. Clara spoke of her lost love, Tessa. A nurse with laughter like bells, taken by cancer's cruel tide. "She taught me holding on hurts less than letting go," Clara said, voice steady but eyes distant. Riley shared Lena's embers, the way Portland's rain had mirrored her tears. "You make me want to stay in the sun," she replied, and Clara's kiss was answer enough, tender, affirming, a vow etched in breath. Spring thawed the hollows with tentative green, dogwoods exploding in bridal white along the trails. Riley's transcripts grew into a chapbook for the Trust, Rivers Unseen, the correspondence of Eleanor Voss and June Harper, illustrated with Eleanor's sketches and Riley's pressed wildflowers. Clara bound the first copy in leather from a local tanner, her potter's hands deft and sure. "For the women who come after," she inscribed on the flyleaf. "May your loves run deep and free." They launched it at a small gathering in the cabin, local artists, a few historians, Lydia traveling up from Savannah with Harlan and Evelyn in tow. The reunion was a quiet miracle. Harlan, gruff but glowing, clasping Eleanor's journal like a Bible. Evelyn transformed in a shawl of soft wool, her eyes tracing the room's warmth with wonder. "It's like seeing June again," she told Riley, voice thick, as they stood by the hearth. "Not the ghost I feared, but the woman whole." Harlan pulled Riley aside later, his embrace awkward but ironclad. "Proud of you, girl, for digging what I buried." Forgiveness flowed then, not as erasure but enrichment. A river swelled by tributaries, carving new channels through old stone. Clara watched from the studio door, her smile a sunrise, and when the guests departed under a canopy of stars, she drew Riley to the porch. "You've rebuilt bridges I didn't know were broken," she said, hands cupping Riley's face. "Stay, build one here with me." The question hung, heavy with home's dual pull, the homestead's red clay calling south, the cabin's hearth anchoring north. Riley leaned into the touch, heart swelling like the French Broad in spring flood. "I'm learning to root where the light is," she whispered. "And yours? It's the kind that lasts." Summer unfurled in lazy abundance, the cabin alive with their shared rhythm. Clara's will spinning tales in clay, Riley's pen capturing the mountain's poetry for a broader audience, queries trickling in from publishers scenting a story of reclamation. They traveled south once, driving the Harper truck, now purring under Clara's expert hand, to Savannah County, where the garden bloomed riotous under Evelyn's care. Picnics by the creek drew the four of them. Harlan's stories of boyhood pranks, Evelyn's recipes laced with new vulnerability, Clara's quiet questions drawing them out like threads from cloth. The petunias thrived, purple sentinels nodding approval, and Riley felt June's presence in the breeze, a benediction on the mended circle. Yet understanding's gift was clarity's edge. Not all wounds sealed seamless. Doubts surfaced on still nights when Clara's sleep grew restless, ghosts of Tessa stirring. Riley's dreams sometimes looped back to Portland's sharp freedoms, the fear of stagnation a shadow on the ridge. They navigated with honesty, words as tools. Long talks by the fire, mapping fears like topographers, emerging stronger. Their love a forge tempering fragility to resilience. "We're not fixing each other," Clara said one dawn as mist rose from the valley. "We're just being together." By harvest, the chapbook sold modestly, its pages rippling out to women in hidden hollows and city lofts, letters of thanks arriving like echoes. "Your words gave name to my silence." Riley and Clara celebrated with a feast on the porch. Wild turkey from Harlan's hunt, pies from Evelyn's oven, the air rich with cinnamon and kinship. As leaves turned, they hiked to Eleanor's overlook, scattering petals from June's pressed flowers into the wind, a ritual of release. "To first loves," Clara toasted, arm around Riley's waist, "and the ones that follow wiser." In that moment, perched on the world's lip, Riley felt the arc complete. From shame sting to this expansive grace, forgiveness not a destination but a wayfaring. The letters had revealed not just who loved June first, but who loved Riley always, herself, woven from resilient threads, now entwined with another steady weave. Rebirth stirred in the subtle shifts of season, the way summer's blaze yielded to autumn's burnished hush, mirroring the quiet alchemy within Riley. The cabin, once a way station, rooted deeper into her days. Its logs absorbing laughter's resonance, the studio's light gilding Clara's focused brow as she shaped vessels from earth. Riley's mornings began with coffee on the porch, journal open to capture the valley's breath. "The mountains hold secrets in their folds, teaching me to unfold my own." Her writing evolved beyond transcription, essays blooming on themes of inherited desire, submissions to literary journals that found purchase in Portland presses, irony's gentle nod. Clara's influence was the catalyst, her pragmatism a counterpoint to Riley's introspection, grounding flights of fancy in the tangible joy of creation. They collaborated on a series of pieces, mugs etched with river motifs from Eleanor's sketches, Riley inscribing interiors with lines from the letters, "Love like water, carving stone to fit." Sales at Asheville markets drew crowds, women lingering to trace the glazes, sharing fragments of their stories in hushed tones. "It's like holding a piece of someone else's courage," one said, and Riley saw in her eyes the ripple. A chain of quiet revolutions, sparked by ink and clay. Southward pulls softened but persisted. Weekends wove them into Savannah County's fabric. Harlan's health faltered that fall, a hip from years bending to furrows, but Evelyn rose to the tending, her hands once clenched in judgment now gentle with compresses and broth. Riley arrived with Clara in tow, the truck laden with mountain apples and herbal teas, finding the rancher a haven of adapted rhythms. Harlan in his recliner, reading June's chapbook aloud with a voice gravelly but glad. "Eleanor's got fire," he admitted one evening, as fireflies danced beyond the screen. "Like my girl here." Evelyn, basting a roast, met Riley's gaze with a nod, wordless, but weighted with the peace of burdens shared. Clara fit seamlessly, her hill country tales bridging divides. Teaching Harlan basic wheel throws on a portable setup in the garage, Evelyn's fingers tentative on the clay, emerging with a lopsided bowl she claimed as treasure. "Never too old for new shapes," Clara encouraged, and in her patience, Riley glimpsed the rebirth's core. Not erasure of past selves but expansion like a river widening to embrace its tributaries. Nights in the guest room brought intimacy's hush, Clara's breath syncing with Riley's, bodies a landscape of rediscovery, touches mapping scars to strengths, love's language fluent in gratitude. Winter's grip loosened into spring's prodigal return, the cabin garden coaxed alive under their joint hands, June's petunias transplanted from the south, mingling with Clara's ferns and columbine. Riley's essays garnered an agent, a contract for a memoir. Threads of the Unnamed, A Daughter's Inheritance. The advance-funded expansions, a kiln upgrade, a trip to Charleston's archives for Eleanor's early works. There, in a dim gallery basement, they uncovered crates of oils. Coastal scenes alive with motion, a hidden portrait of June amid the waves, her smile defiant as tide. She captured the soul, Clara breathed, fingers interlaced with Riley's, the air thick with salt and revelation. Back in the Smokies, rebirth manifested in rituals. Dawn yoga on the ridge, bodies flowing through poses that echoed the letter's grace. Warrior for Eleanor's boldness, child's pose for June's quiet yield. Clara opened the cabin for retreats, women artists arriving in waves, their circles by the hearth spilling stories of loves concealed and claimed. Riley facilitated readings, her voice steady as she voiced the correspondence, tears and applause mingling like rain to rainbow. One participant, a young poet from Atlanta with ink-stained hands, gifted Riley a chapbook of her own. Verses on a mother's unspoken queerness, a mirror held tender. Challenges arose as rebirth demands friction. Clara's doubts resurfaced in the quiet hours, Tessa's anniversary a specter casting long shadows. What if I'm just a rebound from your ghosts? She confessed one stormy eve, thunder rumbling like unresolved chords. Riley drew her close, rain lashing the panes. You're the now, Clara. The letters taught me love isn't first or last. It's the one that fits, that grows with you. They wept together, then made love with a ferocity born of vulnerability, emerging renewed, bonds tempered in honesty's fire. Harlan's decline accelerated come summer. A fall in the barn landing him in Asheville's hospital, monitors beeping like impatient metronomes. The family converged, Evelyn steel-spined at his bedside, Riley and Clara ferrying meals from the cabin, their presence a buffer against the sterile chill. In lucid moments Harlan shared fragments long damned. His courtship of June, sensing her divided heart but choosing silence for the family's sake. I loved her steady, he rasped, hand in Riley's. But you love fierce. Make it count. His passing came gentle, under a full moon that silvered the ridges, leaving a void filled slow with memory's tide. The funeral in Savannah County was a tapestry of mourners. Neighbors in starched collars, Clara's quiet strength beside Riley, Evelyn reciting a psalm with voice unbroken. Afterward, at the homestead, they scattered Harlan's ashes by the creek, the waters carrying him to June's plot under the oak. Evelyn lingered, arm linked with Riley's. He wanted you happy, child. In all ways. Clara, ever the weaver, suggested a memorial garden. Stones etched with Harlan's favorite verses, benches for reflection. As they worked the soil, hands blistered and bonded, Riley felt the cycle turn. Death not end but compost for new growth. By Harvest's Gold, the memoir released to murmurs of acclaim, readings drawing crowds from coast to hollow. Riley and Clara toured lightly, the cabin their anchor, love's routine a rhythm of small wonders. Shared sunsets from the overlook, Clara's head on Riley's shoulder whispers of futures, perhaps a joint studio adoptions pondered in starlit talks. Rebirth wasn't linear but spiral. Each turn higher, wounds woven into wisdom's cloth. One crisp October dawn, Riley woke to Clara's note on the pillow. Meet me at the river. Bring the letters. There on the French Broads bank, Clara knelt with a ring, simple gold river-worn smooth, crafted from Eleanor's scrap metal inscribed inside. Forever yours like the first. Not a cage, Clara said, eyes bright as birch. A circle. Riley's yes was a breath, a vow sealing the arc from fracture to fullness. Light broke fully in the year that followed, a gradual dawn painting the mountains in hues of possibility, each day a canvas stretched for new strokes. The cabin evolved into hearth and hub, walls adorned with Eleanor's restored oils, shelves bowed under Clara's evolving ceramics, bowls veined with gold leaf, vessels for holding light. Riley's memoir climbed quiet ladders, its pages finding homes in book clubs and classrooms, letters from readers a constellation of gratitude. You named my mother's silence, gave me permission to speak mine. She mentored at Clara's retreats, voices amplifying in the circle, young artists claiming space, their works a riot of color against the once stormy studio. Evelyn's transformation deepened, her rancher away station for wayward souls. A spare room for women fleeing small-town judgments, suppers laced with stories over her perfected cornbread. She visited the cabin thrice yearly, arriving with hampers of preserves and leaving with pots clutched like talismans, her laughter loosening like spring thaw. "Your mama would beam," she told Riley one solstice eve, as they strung lanterns in the garden. "Seeing her girl shine." The words carried absolution's glow. Past pains transmuted to prisms, refracting warmth. Clara and Riley's union was a quiet symphony, its notes in the domestic dance. Mornings grinding beans by the window, afternoons hiking to hidden cascades where water sang approval. Evenings with fiddles from town square dances, feet shuffling patterns on the pine floors. Intimacy flowered in layers, nights of slow exploration, bodies a geography of trust, mornings waking entwined, breath sinking like tides. They spoke of expansion, fostering teens from the Trust's network. Clara's will birthing a line of collaborative pieces. Riley's poetry etched into glazes, sold to fund scholarships for queer artists. Challenges came as light's counterpoint, shadows to affirm the shine. A harsh review of the memoir, branding it sentimental Southern Gothic, stinging like nettle. Riley faltered, doubts flooding back. "Am I just romanticizing ghosts?" But Clara drew her to the overlook, arms a bulwark. "Light needs dark to define it, Your story's true because it's lived." They revised together. Riley's next project, a novel weaving Eleanor's voice into fiction's frame, Clara illustrating covers with clay reliefs. Success followed, subdued but sustaining. A fellowship in Charleston, where they walked beaches Eleanor once haunted, hands clasped against the surf's roar. Harlan's absence echoed in holidays, but they honored him with rituals. Thanksgiving at the homestead, Evelyn's table groaning under turkey and tales. A new tradition of reading his letters, simple missives to Riley in Portland, brimming with unvoiced pride. Christmas brought mountain magic. Wreaths of pine and ribbon, Clara's gifts handmade, Riley's verses bound in leather. New Year's Eve, under a sky ablaze with stars, they renewed vows by the fire. Words borrowed from Eleanor. "In this life or the next, forever yours." Spring birthed literal wonders. A litter of kittens from a barn stray, Clara naming them after letters, flowers, Violet, Daisy, curling in laps as they worked. Riley's garden expanded, petunias mingling with Eleanor's favorite irises, blooms a testament to legacies layered. They adopted their first foster, a 16-year-old named Ellis from Atlanta's shelters. Tomboy sharp with wit, eyes holding the world's wariness. Her arrival was chaos and grace. Lessons in glazing, midnight talks on crushes concealed. Riley sharing June's story as permission slip. "Love's not a straight line," Ellis quipped, and Clara laughed, the sound a bridge to belonging. Summer's heat drove them to the river. Tubing lazy bends with Ellis in tow, splashes echoing freedom's hard one. Evelyn joined once, floating tentative, her whoops surprising even herself. Shedding old skins like cicada husks. Back at the cabin, they hosted a reading from the novel. Guests spilling onto the porch, fireflies winking approval. A woman from the crowd, elder with silver braids, approached Riley after. "I knew Eleanor in days. She spoke of June like scripture," said their daughter. "If she came, would carry the torch." Tears pricked. Light's confirmation, a circle closed. Autumn wove gold through the valleys, harvest markets bustling with their wares. Clara's pots gleaming beside Riley's signed copies, Ellis hawking with teenage flair. Sales funded a cabin wing. Bedrooms for fosters, a library of queer Southern voices. One evening, as leaves carpeted the paths, Clara pulled Riley to the studio, unveiling a sculpture. Two figures entwined in clay, rising from river stones, titled First Light. "For us," she said, "and all who follow." Riley traced its curves, heart full as the broad. "It's everything." Winter settled soft, snow blanketing the world in hush, the cabin aglow with hearthfire and kin. Ellis thrived, her sketches adorning walls, talks of college blooming like crocuses. Evelyn's letters arrived weekly, laced with garden updates and gentle queries. When next? Her rebirth a parallel bloom. Riley and Clara skied gentle slopes, breaths clouding in crisp air, love's warmth defying the chill. By spring's return, Light's promise fulfilled itself in quiet crescendo. Ellis's acceptance to art school, funded by the Trust, a gallery show in Asheville for their collaborative works, crowds murmuring of resonant grace. One night, under a meteor shower arcing like fervent prayers, Riley and Clara lay on a quilt by the overlook, Ellis asleep inside. "From shame to this," Riley whispered, head on Clara's chest. "Letters led me home, to you." Clara's fingers wove through auburn strands. And light follows always. For the loving, the living. The stars wheeled on in different witnesses to their peace. A tapestry of forgiveness, empathy's thread pulling tight, love's radiance spilling over ridges into endless dawn. In the years that unfurled like Eleanor's scrolls, the cabin became legend. A haven etched in maps of the heart, drawing wanderers to its door. Riley's novels flowed, each a river branching from the first. Clara's studio echoed with apprentices' hands, clay spinning stories anew. Evelyn passed gently in her 80s, garden gloves on, leaving the homestead to Riley, a final gift, rooted now in reciprocity. They buried her by Harlan in June, petunias marking the plot, a circle of earth holding all. Ellis returned summers, her own loves unfolding bold. Grandchildren came later, towhead whirlwinds chasing fireflies, learning tales of grandmothers fierce and tender. Through it all, Riley and Clara stood sentinel, hands clasped on the porch, watching sunsets gild the valleys, light's eternal return a hymn to resilience. And in quiet moments Riley would unfold the letters once more. Their ink faded but fervent, whispering, "We loved first, but you love still, brighter, boundless." The world turned, shadows yielding to glow. A legacy not of loss but luminous continuance.